and welcome to episode 84 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, self-driving cars freak people out. Tesla Megachargers are on the way. The International Energy Agency has a warning for Canada. Shopping for a new EV is frustrating me. And a validation of our podcast arguments from a world-renowned expert. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, how are you this fall day?
Yeah, I'm great. It is unusually warm. We always seem to talk about the weather, but the weather is weird, so I guess that makes sense.
It is weird.
But yeah, I'm already thinking about next summer, and we are thinking about getting central air conditioning at our house, which we don't have. But it's getting warmer every summer. Last summer was quite bad, kind of unbearable. And forest fire smoke, too. There was so much forest fire smoke last year. It really would have been nice to have air conditioning to keep the windows closed and have better indoor air quality.
That's sad.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about home upgrades, and I'm thinking about the slogan, Electrify Everything, which is a wonderful slogan, which is what we're heading towards for the year 2030. I know you sent me a link to the What on Earth podcast that you want to talk about later. Yeah, I wanted to bring it up because the main thing I got from that podcast was that idea of, we got to electrify everything. So we have to, when we have the choice for new home appliances, we really need to go for the green alternative and for the one that doesn't burn fossil fuels. So I'm just thinking about that in terms of, what I'm going to do with my home upgrades, including air conditioning, which really, even though we don't need it, we should probably get a heat pump instead of just an air conditioner, something that can do heating and cooling. So for someday in the future, we can heat our home with electricity. Although I'm slightly worried about it because I feel like whenever I get quotes for that, people are going to look at me like I'm insane, that I want to heat my home with electricity. But, it's an important thing to do. But yeah, I realized with this electrify everything mantra, which is where we're headed to in 2030, that I think the first step in my house, I'm going to have to upgrade my electrical panel because we have 100 amp service in our house, and, adding things like the electric car charger our panels, I think, basically full. So if we want to do air conditioning, if we want to do an induction cooktop in the future, get rid of our gas range, that's going to need a lot of power, and possibly another car charger. So yeah, that's what I've been thinking about this week. Electrify everything and, start with upgrading the electrical in my house, which, I think everybody's going to be doing in the next, decade or so.
I put a special video out last week where I was comparing my house to how the world will go and what that would take, especially in Canada when you have a little bit less solar than places like Australia. What you want to do is what the world will have to do in the next, hopefully before 30 years, and a lot of it has to be done this decade. But by the end of the decade, we're going to start switching over to heat pumps in Canada, I'm sure, if we're going to meet any climate goals, and it's going to take money and stuff like that. So how do you feel right now? Is it too expensive?
Well, I'm going to find out. I haven't gotten any quotes yet, but yeah, I'm assuming it's more money to get a heat pump rather than just a standard air conditioner. But, that point from that podcast we're going to talk about later, I think it's a huge one. All of these things, furnaces, air conditioning, they all have a lifespan, and it is going to be very expensive to replace all this stuff and electrify everything. But if we do it when this stuff is at the, normal end of its lifespan, it's money that kind of has to be spent anyway. So I don't want to put in just a central air unit and then 10 years from now realize, oh crap, I should have put in a heat pump. But, it is, you and me we're ahead of the curve. We both have electric cars. This is not the normal thing around here. And yes, I really am worried about getting quotes and having people look at me like I'm insane, that I want to heat my home with electricity.
Okay. Well, speaking of retrofitting, many months ago, the Canadian government announced a sort of retrofit program that sounded sweet. $5,600, up to $5,600. And they didn't get into details. They never do. And it's only at the end do you find out what the details are. They don't publish the details.
Yeah.
It's not in their best interest to publish the details. Well, apparently, their website crashed and I couldn't even get in for a few days. And then I finally got on the list and you pick a home retrofit company in your area, and you do that. And it's been, 5 months, 4 or 5 months, at least, probably 5 months since I applied. And I finally got a call. And I was very disappointed because they said it was $550 for the evaluation number one, $250 for the second evaluation to prove that what you've had done, fits for the grant. And when we had this done the first time, it was $150 each time. And I thought that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was to me. So yeah, you get $600 rebated for that stuff, but then you're still $250 out of pocket. And they're really only paying at most 20% of your retrofits. And, a contractor can up their price by 20% because everybody's getting retrofits done. And it's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
So I canceled it. Not doing it at all right now. I do want to improve my windows and my insulation, though, someday. So,
yeah, and that's the purpose of the program, is to upgrade the insulation in your house, I guess.
Brian, we are big on TikTok now, and I'm not kidding about that.
I know.
I've kidded about it in previous weeks. I am not kidding about it now.
You took my voice, you put it on a TikTok, and now I'm a TikTok celebrity.
Yes, I don't know how you could leave the house. We've had 200,000 people watch that video, which is just an audio clip from our show, talking about how running a leaf blower for an hour is the same as driving from Los Angeles to Denver as far as smog emitting particulate goes. So California, big smog problem, very kind of depressing smog problem. I've talked about being at Joshua Tree and seeing the smog on plaques there, mentioning the smog on plaques because it blows in from the coast on a regular basis that they can make a plaque. So yeah, and of course, California's had a smog problem far worse than anybody else in North America for a long time in the 70s. And that's kind of what got me interested in all this stuff, is seeing that on the news. So. No,
and I want to say a shout out and a thanks to everybody who commented and corrected the misinformation, because there's already like 1,000 comments or more. And a lot of people saw the clip and just simply didn't believe it. This cannot be true. But then there were lots of people that stepped in. I do not enjoy arguing with people on the internet. No. It's my least favorite thing to do. But lots of people stepped in and said, oh, well, it's a 2-stroke engine instead of a 4-stroke engine. There's no catalytic converter. And, we didn't cite a source or anything, too. So I wanted to mention that. It was the California Air Resource Board. That's where that stat comes from. Which, I assume is true. But, so thanks to everybody who commented and tried to explain to everybody else who didn't seem to believe it.
Well, we had a letter from a regular listener who didn't believe it either, who thought it didn't have anything to do with carbon emissions, so who cares? Well, that's easy for us to say, but if you're living in Los Angeles and everybody's mowing their lawns and it adds to the pollution, it's all good. I mean, I smell my neighbor's gas. You smell your neighbor's gas mowing the lawn. It's like cigarette smoking. We used to just put up with it, and it was part of our daily smells. And no, not anymore.
But these small engine things, they're way smellier than cars are, and that's because they pollute more.
And what's a big problem, the biggest problem in the world right now is probably India with pollution, where people are getting sick inside their homes. And, well, 2-wheeled, 3-wheeled vehicles in India are the norm. They're quite common, and there's millions and millions of them, and they're putting out pollution. And there's a company with a gap factory that we've talked about that is going to put out electric versions of those, which is going to save people money. I want to talk more about TikTok.
Sure.
Because 200,000 people, I mean, if we had that, for our podcast on a regular basis, maybe our podcast should just be 30 seconds long on TikTok every week. Well, we're going to continue to put that on. The same videos on YouTube, it's got like 12 views. It's just TikTok is where it's at. If you can get traction.
Hello to probably thousands of new listeners to the podcast that probably found us on TikTok.
No, Brian. They don't translate. They don't really translate. We've probably got 5 new listeners. If you're watching TikTok all day addictively, you're not going to run over to the podcast, because podcast is the opposite of TikTok, wouldn't you say?
Yes, but if you did find us on TikTok, please send us a message.
Yeah, send us a message, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And if you're on TikTok, you may not know what email is, so And I can't read all the TikTok comments. We always craving feedback.
Yeah,
well, that's
hundreds.
too much.
1,000
comments is too much for me to get through. I can't devote my life to this show 24/7. I can only devote part of my life to this show. So, and I went by Brian, I went by the Toyota dealership yesterday. You know how I was talking about there's less and less cars there? There's hardly any cars there now.
Wow.
Like, it is frightening. It was frightening to see how many cars they did not have. There used to be 4 rows of them tightly parked together. And now, you know what they're doing? They're parking them end to end. Because that's the next step in spreading them out, is to park them end to end, because they have so few cars. And that brings me to my next point, which I wanted to talk about, because I'm thinking about my next car.
Yeah.
And the clock is ticking. I have until April or March or something when my lease is up on our Prius. People say it's easy for me to find a used EV or something. It's not. I'm finding it very difficult, because our car payments were only $307 a month. And the way that is we had a lease, and the only reason we bought new cars is because it was cheaper than buying used as far as the payment went.
Yeah, and it's under warranty. And
so we had great new cars that were way better than the used ones and way more reliable when we spent a life with unreliable vehicles. That's really good. And it's because it was 0% financing. They had a deal on. That made it $307 a month, which is really good. Now, I figure we could save $100 a month in gas and oil changes pretty easily. And so we could afford, 400 and change, 407, and it would still be on equal footing. But I can't do that. I'm not seeing anything that even comes close. I'll take I'll start with the Nissan LEAF, because you mentioned it last week. Am I interested in that? Well, I went and priced it out on their website, and it's $515, and that's just for the 40 kilowatt hour battery.
Wow.
Which is essentially twice of what my my 13 LEAF is after degradation. And there's no dealership here. Long trips, very difficult. Doable, but really, really difficult. Like 45 minutes or an hour charging time to go an hour.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And you're trying to replace your Prius, which is kind of your highway car. So you want something that can go decent distances.
The Kona from Hyundai is $568 a month. I always hate it because they ask you do you want to include taxes? Yeah, I don't want to, but yeah, you click on taxes and suddenly, whoa, your payment's doubled somehow. I don't know how. Well, why wouldn't you want to include taxes? Since when do you not want to include taxes? You have to pay them. The Chevy Bolt, another cheap car that we've talked about. It pissed me off because you have to pay $1,000 for heated seats and steering wheel, and that came included in my Nissan LEAF, especially for the Canadian models, but in all models. And the heated steering wheel didn't come, but the heated seats came in the Prius standard. A lot of things come standard in the Prius. It was $507 a month with $3,000 down. So it's $200 more. And it's not a great car. It's not a great EV. It doesn't check all my boxes. The ID4 from Volkswagen, which I believe you mentioned last week was coming here, that's $620 a month. Twice what we pay for our current, thing. I mean, you're getting a bigger vehicle. You're getting a crossover-y vehicle with maybe a bit more cargo and a bit higher off the ground. But still, I also hate paying. I hate paying for $1,000 for heated seats, because I bought one of those heated seat pads that you can plug into your lighter and $20.
Yep.
It's the same thing. That's my journey, Brian. It's been tough, and I don't see it changing. And then I went and looked on Auto Trader, because that's how I got my Nissan LEAF. I went and shipped it from in a suburb of Montreal. Those are bad too, because you have to pay it off in 5 years. Like, I can find some cars that are around $25,000 instead of $45,000. But you have to pay them off in 5 years, and the payments are high, and there's a lot more interest involved these days. It's like 6, 7, 8%, 7% interest. Well, let's move on with the show.
Yeah, so just a little update on some autonomous cars, the Waymo cars in San Francisco. I pulled a clip from The Daily Show, which has a clip from the local news in San Francisco, but I got it from The Daily Show. So there's a little introduction here from Trevor Noah and a clip from the news in San Francisco about what's going on with the self-driving taxis that they've got going on in San Francisco.
San Francisco is one of the cities where they're testing self-driving cars. And for some reason lately, all these cars are getting stuck in the same dead-end street. Nobody knows why it's happening, and it's totally freaking people out.
They come all day right to the end of 15th Avenue where there's nothing else to do but make some kind of a multi-point turn and head out the way they came in. Now, not long after that car is gone, there will be another which will make the same turn and leave before another car shows up and does the exact same thing.
There's some days where it can be up to 50. I mean, it's literally every 5 minutes.
At several points today, they showed up on top of each other, these cars packed with technology, stopping in a queue as if completely baffled by a dead end.
50, my God.
Yeah, it's like the Dawn of the Dead. They're zombie cars driving through San Francisco.
If this was Tesla, they would, they would get a report of this, that their self-driving failed at this location, and next update, it would assumably be taken care of. I'm surprised that these other companies are not taking care of it. And there's also been reports that, mud puddles and things like that have confused them.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but, nobody's technology is perfect yet. So all these things will improve soon, hopefully.
There's two aspects, though, Brian, to this story with the competition to Tesla. One is that they're actually doing it.
Yeah.
Right. They're actually charging for rides without a driver in it. They're driving around doing their thing. The other side of the story is they're not doing very well. They're still running into problems. And I'll get into some of them because CNN did a report on this, and they tested the Waymo service themselves and spoke with 8 Waymo customers. And Waymo says that self-driving vans have given tens of thousands of rides since the company launched a public robo-taxi service in Arizona a year ago. So there's actually, people say self-driving is never coming. It's there.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but it's there now, and you can't assume things won't get better because technology always improves no matter what. Users say they're generally very satisfied, and also I found this interesting, they prefer it to Uber, Lyft, or car ownership. They're probably like me. They don't like people. Yeah, they just, a ghost car comes, picks them up. They don't have to deal with anyone. They're working on their laptop on the way to work or whatever.
Yeah, no, nothing worse than a chatty cab driver.
That's true, and I really hate that. There's no getting used to that. So anyway, trips are generally longer, though, than those other services, and less direct than an Uber or Lyft driver. The taxis still aren't using shared turn lanes, the company said, and that forces them to sometimes take roundabout routes like 3 right turns instead of a left. Waymo's prices also can be cheaper. So the vehicles they also like the way they drive. They like the way they drive cautiously rather than I've been in when we were in Montreal shooting something. We all kissed the ground when we got out of a cab because it went backwards down a street at full speed. And I'll never forget that. I guess the cabs in Montreal are terrible, but they appreciated the way they were very cautious drivers, if you will. So one user told CNN Business that in a recent trip, it would take usually a 10-minute drive. It was taking 27 minutes with Waymo. So that's really, really bad.
Yeah.
That's making me think that, the way they're doing it with vision, if that AI just suddenly learns and becomes really smart one of these days, that they're going to make big progress. But it's been also frustrating and slow on that front.
Yeah, and I'd mentioned too on the video clip that of the San Francisco, they appeared to be Jaguar I-Pace cars, the fully electric Jaguar I-Pace.
Well, Mr. Stockton, I would like to talk about a podcast that one of our listeners actually had recommended in an email to us a couple weeks ago. And it's something that I happened to hear on the way home from the gym last week because they played it on CBC Radio over the airwaves. It's the podcast you mentioned in the introduction to the show. It's called What on Earth? It is a show from CBC Radio in Canada, our public broadcaster. They did an entire show with a person by the name of Saul Griffin. Now, he is a scientist and inventor who has dedicated himself to fighting climate change. He's actually Australian. We'll hear a few clips from him.
The title of the book is Electrify, an Optimist's Playbook for Our Clean Energy Future.
One of the questions we get, I know the people on the street will say, if you transition and all transportation is electric vehicles, electric trucks, and our home heating is electricity, what would happen? Well, you would need 3 times the electricity.
So even if you triple the amount of electricity we need, it's still, like I said earlier, less than half of the energy the US uses today.
Makes sense, and that's what I was just talking about at the top of the show. I know that I'm going to have to increase the electrical, everything of my house. So that's the first step for me.
So even from our TikTok comments, I can see that everybody's got their own pet solution.
Yeah.
And the pet solutions are not currently available at scale and at price. Hydrogen, one. We'll get to that in a second. Another one would be fusion or small nuclear reactors, small modular nuclear reactors. Those are the 3 main things that I can think of. And fusion has been way off for a long time.
And none of those are really ready, and solar, wind, and batteries are ready. So let's do that.
We have to act right now. We've got the climate conference coming up at the end of the month, and people have to step up and get a lot done this decade, or we're in big trouble. So another question I got is regularly is, how do you deal with intermittent green power? And that's why they want to come up with all these other things. Batteries are here in a way, but they're also not ubiquitous, right?
True. Yeah. We need way more capacity in the plants.
But the curve of pricing is also very low.
We're going to have batteries everywhere in the system. So the collective batteries in our vehicles is going to be a huge amount of storage. We can also use the thermal systems in our home, namely our hot water heaters and our heating systems, to also store yesterday's or the day before's energy and give it to us when we want it. So we'll have an enormous amount of storage. Once you electrify all of the vehicles, their collective battery could run the whole country for 3 or 4 days.
Thought that was interesting, so I included that in the clip. If you electrified all the vehicles, they could run the grid for 3 or 4 days. The problem with electrifying the grid is your peaks. I mean, you don't have to run the grid for 3 or 4 days, but if you might need to run it for 5 minutes here and there. Yeah. And you can take a little bit of power, and then that means you need a lot less.
Yeah, and not all the cars are all plugged in at the same time, but there'll always be enough to help when, in the future.
The question we have here in Canada, in a northern latitude, is how do you balance winter and summer? How could you possibly do that without throwing nuclear in or something like that? Well, here's an answer for that.
For the how do you balance summer and winter, honestly, we will use a couple of techniques. One of them will be oversupply. So the environmentalist movement comes from a place of scarcity, not abundance. And so we've always imagined just barely getting to 100% renewables. But I think we need to get to 120 or 130%, because then we're designing for the winter minimum in production, and which also unfortunately coincides with the maximum energy use in the year, because that's when everyone heats their homes. But if we have oversupply, you can meet that. And we will also use transmission geographically from east to west and north to south.
Yeah, people don't understand how this can work without their pet thing, whatever it is. But it can. I mean, you overbuild something that's really cheap, a power source that's really cheap, you overbuild and waste it. And they're making a solar plant down by Weyburn in Saskatchewan here, an hour south of us or so, and it's they're building it over capacity. They're going to waste some of it in the summertime just because overall it's economical to feed more in the wintertime, and they'll make more money because the grid will only allow them so much as a peak.
Yeah, and there's some interconnectedness already between provinces, between states, or between the U.S. and Canada. There's already a flow of power in both directions. Canada exports a lot of our hydropower to the U.S., but we just have to do more of that. The grid's just going to have to get smarter and cleaner and have more interconnectedness and more shipping the power around the continent.
Here's one more clip, and it's why hydrogen is not practical as a solution and not necessary. This is something everyone is hydrogen. Even our premiers, our oil premiers are pushing hydrogen.
But you have to remember, clean hydrogen starts with electricity anyway, and you'd have to generate 2 or 3 times as much electricity if you're going to go through hydrogen, which is really just better understood as a battery, and a not particularly good battery. And so I think if we're trying to do half the world's energy through a hydrogen system, we just get to an intolerable amount of solar and wind that you have to install because the hydrogen is inefficient and you'd need to double or triple the amount. The physics is immutable on this. It's just we're up against the law of thermodynamics.
Now, hydrogen is real, but they haven't made much green hydrogen yet.
Yeah.
And if you have to use 3 times the solar to make the hydrogen, which is essentially a way of storing it, because you have to have clean energy to make the hydrogen, or what's the point? However, if we're using it as a ship, if it's the only way that we can get a shipping working, if it is the only way, and I don't know that it is, might even be partially hydrogen, something else, or long distance air travel, then maybe we do that for those things, or the things that we can't store it, because it's not the best battery in the world as far as a grid is concerned.
No, and if you think about an electric car versus a hydrogen-powered car, there's just way more extra steps with the hydrogen. With an electric car, you can literally just put up a solar panel and juice the battery up directly, whereas the hydrogen, it's this whole extra process of making and storing the hydrogen and then going somewhere to fill up. No one wants that.
No, in Canada, on our political system here, we've got a lot of people, the parties pro-climate now, or seemingly so. And the Liberals is about as left-wing a party that's ever going to get in government, and they're just considered center-left. They've been doing a lot of work on the climate and the carbon tax, and it wasn't easily politically swallowed by a lot of people. But they also went out and bought a pipeline because we've got a big oil and gas industry in Canada, and they were too cowardly to say, this is what bugs me about them. My biggest peeve with them is that they were too cowardly to say oil and gas is done and then the pandemic hit, and we don't talk about that anymore so much. What bugs me is their defense of it, and we have a bit of it here from the podcast of what our environment minister said.
Canada needs to ensure that in the context of that transition, it's extracting full value for its resources and using that money to push forward in terms of reducing emissions.
It sounds like a word salad to me, but I hear the same arguments are being made in Australia right now. The same arguments are being made in America or all over the world.
Now, that's blunt. I laughed when I heard that because it's true. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook. It's Saul Griffin is the person responding to the Canadian Environment Minister in his defense. It's BS, and we know that. You know that. I know that.
Yeah, and we have a thing here in our province where they did carbon capture with one of our coal plants that generates electricity. And it does kind of work, and they are capturing a bunch of carbon, but it costs, I think, $1.8 billion to do it. And, I ran the numbers at one time, like, how much does a solar panel cost? And, I forget the figure now, but, you could buy millions of solar panels for, just send the money directly to the clean energy. This interim step of buying pipelines and making money off that and then putting it into clean energy makes no sense.
Yeah, it costs money to get the coal in the first place. The coal prices the cost of getting coal is going up. Not a lot, but it's trending in a positive direction in the way upwards. Everything else is going down. It costs money to operate that plant, and I just saw a post from our utility saying it was offline for a long time, which has been offline a lot. Then it comes back online, and and then it's an absurd thing to store that stuff in the ground at great expense. It's a useless product mostly. Anyway, here's his optimism. Here's Saul Griffin's optimism about the world.
I think we're one political cycle away from where the technology and the economics works everywhere. Then these governments will yield because the people will demand it. Batteries are falling in price so quickly. Solar is still falling in price so quickly. Electric vehicles will be the same price in the showroom in 2025 or 2026 as their petrol counterpart. At that point, political parties from both sides of the aisle in all countries will be trying to gravitate towards this more economic, better for our children, better for our health solution.
So there's a story we've been covering here on the podcast, and that is the recalls that are happening with the Chevy Bolt electric vehicle. Chevrolet has been forced to recall basically every Chevy Bolt that has ever been made. And this is a very expensive thing, but they got LG to pay up. So LG are the suppliers of the batteries, and they have now made an agreement with General Motors to repay $1.9 billion to Chevy to cover the cost of these recalls. So that's probably a nice relief for General Motors to not have to foot that bill themselves.
So it was LG's fault. They're the second largest battery supply in the world, and these battery supplying people are getting quite big by the day. It's interesting. It's interesting that they took responsibility for it. I don't know what's going to happen to the old batteries, if they're going to recycle them, if they're, I wasn't worried about that when I was looking at a Chevy Bolt, because I knew that the battery would be covered for 8 years. We talked about that last week. So
yeah, and the chance of fire is low, and hopefully, you'd get the new battery pack before you burn yourself up.
That is a big. I'm sure every electric car maker has that fear that their batteries, their most expensive part of the car, would be defective. There's one thing if an airbag's defective. That costs money in itself, but this is a big one. Okay, so the U.S. federal government, Mr. Stockton, is going to lease waters off nearly the entire U.S. coastline to commercial wind farms by 2025. 7 major offshore wind farms would be developed on the east and west coast of the Gulf of Mexico under a plan that was just announced last week. The Interior Department is looking to work with other federal agencies to increase renewable energy on public lands. I find that interesting. I've never heard that one before. Have you? Public lands for solar or wind?
That all sounds amazing. I'm in favor.
I'm very excited, Brian, because it's time for an old segment that we haven't had on the show for a long time, and that is the boring story of the week.
Yeah, so I decided to revive this segment from long ago. I was going to talk about this last week, and I thought, it's kind of boring. Let's not talk about it. But it kept, sticking in my mind. So, here we go, boring story of the week. But this relates to what you were talking at the top of the show about, the Toyota dealer in our town. Very few cars on the lot. There is a worldwide chip shortage. There's logistics problems of all kinds, but there's a massive semiconductor chip shortage. And so a lot of the legacy automakers have been really cutting back their production because they can't get enough chips. And this is important because, Tesla has still been able to increase their production like quite a lot. And so everybody's kind of wondering, well, how can Tesla be increasing and everyone else is cutting back? So there's been a lot of talk and a lot of rumors that, well, maybe it isn't just the chip shortage. Maybe the legacy automakers are cutting back production because no one wants to buy their cars because they're gas and not electric. So I think we're not there yet. And I just found a really good explanation of this on the Tesla Daily podcast. And he's explaining why he believes it is the chip shortage that is causing production to be cut way back, that it's not a huge demand problem, at least not yet. And I really like the Tesla Daily podcast, but it took me a while to warm up to the show because it is a little bit boring kind of by its nature. He takes, Tesla often has very sensational headlines in the news. Tesla is a very clickbaity kind of company. Everybody's always sensationalizing the news around Tesla. But the Tesla Daily podcast desensationalizes all the stories that have to do with Tesla. And that's why I like it. It's sort of a sober second thought at all the Tesla headlines. So here is his clip explaining why the chip shortage is not affecting Tesla as much as the other players.
Quick, simple example here. Let's say 2 businesses. One, business A, sold 950 units in 2020. They want to plan 5% growth up to 1,000 units for 2021 versus business B, which sold 100 units in 2020 and planned to grow to 200 units in 2021. So 100% growth year over year. If all of a sudden you introduce a 30% supply constraint on those plans, well, business A loses 30% of their 1,000 planned units. They end up with 700, which is actually going to be down 26% year over year. Versus business B, if they're hit with the same 30% supply constraint, that's 60 units of their 200 unit plan. So their actual sales come in at 140. So sales end up 40% versus business A down 26%, even though both had the same supply constraint.
Yeah. But a nice explanation, I thought. So Tesla had planned to grow as much as 100% this year. So that means they just had tons of orders in for chips, way more. So, they got less chips and could still grow.
Right. And the other people were just probably moderate growth, or maybe not any because of the pandemic.
Maybe stagnant. And then suddenly you're 30% fewer chips. Well, guess what? You can only make 30% fewer cars.
All right. Let's move on to some feedback. Joe contacted us again we've heard from Joe before. Joe contacted us on Twitter and gave us a CNN story about fake milk. And just to sum it up, it says that a California-based Perfect Day company uses fungi to make dairy protein that is molecularly identical to the protein in cow's milk. In other words, it's cow's milk. That means it can be used to make dairy products such as cheese, yogurt, milk. It produces protein, which is then filtered and dried into a powder and then used in products like cheese and ice cream, which are already in the shelves in the United States and Hong Kong. So not a pie-in-the-sky dream. It's happening. And that is going to disrupt agriculture. And we can use that land to put some solar panels up. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right. And Tony Seba has said that the dairy industry is one of the ones that is in the most danger of being disrupted this decade, and that's why.
It's because if you look at a jar of milk, the actual milk is a tiny amount. The rest is water, and we have water.
Yeah, it's mostly water.
It's so easy to disrupt agriculture. A lot of people don't see that coming, except for the people who listen to our show. Now we got another letter from Mitchell here, who's written us a few letters now, and just want to read part of one letter. He says, I want to thank you both very much because 2 Tuesdays ago, you really made my day by reading my entire long letter on the show and discussing the things I brought up in detail. I had a smile from ear to ear. And then he gave us lots and lots of feedback, which we always love from our listeners. Thank you so much, Mitchell, and we hope you enjoy the podcast. By the way, if you want to get a hold of us, you know what you could do? You could leave a voicemail, speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow, on Twitter or TikTok. And we're big on TikTok. I'm telling you, we're huge on TikTok. Clean Energy Pod on TikTok. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel or email us if you're one of those old-fashioned people, and I know you are because you're listening to a podcast. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And Brian, you have a story about the International Energy Agency.
Yeah, and it's very specific for us in where we live in Canada, which is oil country and oil sands country near us. The International Energy Agency is predicting that Canada is going to be in trouble by the end of this decade because we have some of the most carbon-intensive oil. And so they're warning us here in Canada that we may not be able to compete by the end of the decade against other places that can produce the same kind of oil, but much, much cheaper.
That's a warning that has not been heeded in any way, shape, or form. This is what keeps me up at night. Our local oil government here in Saskatchewan and Alberta and in Canada as a whole are not heeding this advice, and then we're going to be screwed. We're going to fall behind competitively and in other ways.
No, and the price of oil is spiking up again, and even the price of coal in some places. And
did you see our jackass premier tweet about that? He was so happy the price of oil was up, but he was mocking the former Green Party leader, saying that oil is dead. Oil's not dead. Look at it. It's $82. How stupid can you be? I'm sorry, how stupid can you be? The man is a dumbwad.
But you can see where they're going to get fooled because everybody feels great around here when the price of oil is high. It's like,
I feel great when I'm shooting heroin into my arm. Doesn't mean I got to feel great later. My God, how stupid are you? Pick up a freaking newspaper or listen to our podcast, which is pretty much just as good as that. Coming up later in the show is the lightning round. We'll be cleaning up the rest of the headlines from this week as we cover everything there is to cover. And let's get to some Tesla news. Brian Stockton, what's going on with Tesla this week?
Yeah, so I've been wondering for a long time, and we've discussed it on the show, how are they going to charge the Tesla electric semi-truck, or really any electric semi-truck for that matter? And there just hasn't been any plan ever announced. And the Tesla semi-truck is supposed to go into production soon. But, you can't typically charge one of those in the traditional Tesla charging stations because they're in, tight spaces or mall parking lots or, I don't know, maybe they have a plan. But the first Megacharger has been spotted at the Gigafactory in Nevada, the Tesla Gigafactory. And it looks similar to a Tesla supercharger station, but there's these sort of long rows basically where the trucks are going in. So I just think that's exciting. We're getting close to electric semis being on the road. Everyone figures that these are going to be 1 megawatt chargers. The current Tesla chargers top out about 250 kilowatts. So this is going to be 4 times that, 1 megawatt of power probably to charge these electric semis. And yeah, if these are going to be on the road, hopefully soon in the next year or two, there's yet more charging infrastructure that's got to be built, even though Tesla has already built a ton of charging infrastructure.
Now, we don't know for sure what the final product will look like, but is it safe to assume that if it charges at a megawatt, might there be 2 cables or 3 cables going to 3 separate battery packs? Yeah,
that has often been speculated. Maybe the battery is split into 3 sections or 2 sections, and you plug in 3 different cables perhaps, or 2 different cables, and that would maybe help it charge faster too if you kind of split it up like that. These people who drive them will be on the job doing this. It'll be part of their job. It's not something that you would want to do in a car, a consumer product. We often talk about fires when it comes to electric cars. So there's a company called Gruber Motors that is known for repairing old Teslas, particularly the old original Tesla Roadster, of which there's just a few thousand of those. And so it's in Phoenix, Arizona, and they've become the go-to place if you need your old Tesla Roadster fixed. And anyway, they had a horrible fire. It doesn't sound like it started in a car. It's they think an electrical panel at this point, but 25 original Tesla Roadsters went up in flames in this fire. And these are rare vehicles. There's not that many of them. So to lose 25, and I believe some other cars and some other Teslas as well. But yikes, 25. Most of them haven't been retired or gone to the junkyard or anything. They've gotten into an accident and they've been retired that way or something like that. But they are kind of a collector's car now. I'd sure like one. not as good as a modern Tesla, but No, and I think the prices have been creeping up for them because they are, kind of a collector's item. So Tesla Insurance is launching in another state, in one state, and that state is Texas. We talked about the full self-driving beta on the show a couple of times, and they're deploying it to more people, and they're using the Tesla Insurance Safety Score to let people into the full self-driving beta program. It's a safety score based on how well you drive or how safely you drive. But anyway, that was developed for Tesla Insurance, which they've been planning to roll out to more states. Tesla Insurance is available only now or previously in California, and it wasn't using this software because they haven't got approval for it yet in California. But the Tesla Insurance is now available in Texas, and they're using this safety score software. So this is the very first time that kind of real-time driving data has been used to calculate insurance payments. And it sounds like, your insurance could even go up or down on a month-to-month basis, kind of based on what your safety score is. So I'm just fascinated by that. I have to bring this up. I got into the worst almost accident I've got into. Yeah. The other day, I was driving to pick up my daughter in the afternoon across town on a 70-kilometer-an-hour street, and it was raining, and someone pulled out in front of me from an intersection. Like they were at a red light, and you can turn right on a red light. Well, they pulled right in front of me, and I hit the brakes, and I was sure I was going to get into an accident. And I've been in a lot of close accidents that I've avoided. Yep. And my tires, by the way, are bald as hell. They need replacing on my LEAF.
This is my Nissan LEAF, 2013 Nissan LEAF. I hit that and the ABS kicked in immediately. Now, the ABS saved that bastard's life and limb. I don't know if it would have killed him, but I was headed right towards the driver's side door, and I was able to hit the brakes and turn. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without the ABS. I would have went. This is one of the marvels of modern safety features in cars, and also had not traction control, but stability control that would have kept me from flipping around or losing control. So I had all that going for me, and it all kicked in, and I was so thankful to have it. I was certain there was no way I was not going to have an accident. What I did is I turned into the lane to the left of me, and fortunately there was nobody there. I had no idea. I couldn't look. I had to assume that hitting the person beside me was going to be a better option than a side T-bone. Because at 70 kilometers an hour.
And with ABS brakes, you can still steer. That's one of the benefits of them. You can slam on the brakes and still steer. So it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah, that's what happened. And you read about that, but to have it in practice to save your ass is something great. Also, Rivian and Model X you wanted to talk about are starting their deliveries, right? Does that mean they're going to consumers from Rivian?
Yeah, this is what's been happening apparently over the weekend. A few have been delivered to customers, the Rivian electric pickup truck, and also the Tesla Model X. So the Model S and the Model X from Tesla have been not really available for the last several months. They've been retooling them and refreshing them. So the Model S came out maybe a month ago, and they have now started deliveries of the refreshed Model X. So yeah, more electric cars on the road. And the Rivian, I'm looking to see more reviews of the Rivian now that there's a few more out on the roads. That's going to be exciting.
All right, Brian, we're getting to the end of the show, and that means it's time for the lightning round. This is where we clean up the headlines and go through things very quickly. CATL to spend $5 billion on a battery recycling facility in China. That's $5 billion. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought it up. That's a lot of money for a recycling facility.
It's a lot of money, and CATL is already huge and looking to get huger.
The U.S. to power 5 million homes with community solar by 2025. Community solar is when you have sort of a co-op or an organization of people who get together and have a little solar farm in and around a city usually, and they own those solar panels. And they get they put the money in, but then they get the money back at the end. So community solar is one of the most powerful tools to provide affordable solar energy to all American households. You don't have to have a roof. You don't have to have a house. You can still invest in community solar if you want to do something yourself. And the way the prices are going, depending on where you live, Arizona would be the best case scenario, but you would, get a lot of payback fairly quickly. Not so much here in Canada, but anyway, the rainforest is losing 200,000 acres a day. Just going to throw that out there in the bad news pile. Just putting it out there, Brian. We don't have to dwell on it. Just putting it out there. And Tesla says U.S. sales are up 104%. This is what we were talking about earlier. And the U.S. auto industry is down 22%. That's a figure that I tore from a headline.
Yeah, and the Tesla stock has been on a bit of a tear again, finally getting back up to close to all-time highs because their third quarter financial statement is coming out in a couple of days, and people are expecting very good news.
Headline/factoid, the fossil fuel industry is responsible for 65% of greenhouse gas emissions, and the fossil fuel industry needs to go bye-bye. Fast EV charging is coming to San Francisco Bay Area Taco Bells. Your thoughts?
We don't really have Taco Bell around here.
We had it for a while. We kicked it out.
I guess it'd be nice to charge your car while you were there, I guess.
Look, Brian, any reason somebody goes to Taco Bell is because they're high, and they shouldn't be driving if they're high. So I'm not sure why this makes sense. Taco Bell is I went to it in my son's city where he's going to school, and Kind of disgusting. It should be better. It's nice and cheap, and it could be better. Although he did recommend the Doritos Taco, which they've come out with. Anyway, just a plug there. If Doritos or Taco Bell wants to send me free stuff, you go ahead right now.
Please.
A study in Nature finds there's about 0.2 million square kilometers of usable roof space for solar in the United States. That's 0.2 million square kilometers. That's enough for about 10 to 20 terawatts. And by comparison, their goal for the Green Net Zero by 2050 plan seeks just under 20 terawatts. So that's interesting to think. I mean, it's not the most cheapest way to do things, but rooftop solar could power the whole stinking, United States practically.
That's amazing.
There's a lot going around. If you include factories and schools and shopping malls and all that. Tesla increases the price of the Model 3 SR Plus in Canada. This is your car. And do you know how much it is now over what you paid?
Yeah, actually, I think it's back up to the same price that I paid, because I think I bought mine and then it went down a couple thousand and now it's back up again. So.
Oh, okay. They're always changing the prices on things. But it seems, Brian, based on customer delivery times of next August in some cases and 6 months in others, that they're really have more demand than they know what to do with. Right now.
It's crazy. There's very long waiting lists for Teslas, and that's with them. They're already making 1 million cars a year, and they can't keep up.
So in China, in September 21 sales figures are in. They're at 70% battery electric vehicle share, which actually is pretty good, because once you hit a figure like that, you go way up. So it takes off on the curve. Saskatchewan residents I have here will be paying $75 more per year. So
for heat,
for heat, $75. New York will transition to 100% electric school buses by 2035. Yes, good thing. I'd like to see that a lot earlier. Starting today, starting yesterday. Every new school bus you buy should be electric. Tesla has updated the solar roof webpage and has dropped the claim that its tiles are 3 times stronger than standard tiles on roofs. Do you have any comment on that, Brian?
No.
COP26 is coming at the end of the month in Glasgow. You're hearing about it all over the place. And I thought, in the spirit of some of our emails that we've got, that people are new to this sort of thing, and I thought I would just point out what it stands for. COP stands for Conference of the Parties. The summit will be attended by countries that signed the 1994 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So Conference of the Parties, they get together and they discuss what they're going to do, their commitments. In Canada here, we're kind of baked in based on political election promises, but we'll see how that goes. GM, Brian, in 2016, this is how we're wrapping up the show with some good news this week, said that they will use 100% renewable electricity in U.S. operations by 2050. 5 years ago, they said that. Now they are saying that's going to happen by 2025. Just 3 years and change from now. That, my friend, is how fast things are moving. And we thank you all for listening to our show. We'll be back next week with another show. Check us out on TikTok, on Twitter, wherever you are. Consider rating and reviewing our show on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And we look forward to talking to you next week.
See you next week.